Hello everyone. This week we're going to be reading from A Witch in a Fix. It's by Marian Broderick and it's done by O'Brien Press. I'll give you a little bit about what the book is actually about this week. It's a book of mischief and magic. Anna's science teacher really gets on her nerves. But is that a good enough reason to turn her into a giant rat? With a big angry rat on the loose, Anna soon realises that she's made a very bad mistake. How will she turn it back into her teacher? And how can she do it quickly before anyone else finds out that she's an apprentice witch? Anna can't admit what she's done, so no one can help her with her big furry problem. Or can they? Sometimes even witches need a little help from their friends. So let's have a look and see what happens. A Witch in a Fix by Marian Broderick. All the teachers in St. Munchkin's are really cool. I especially like Mrs. Winkle, the head, but I've got a good reason for that, as you will see. The only one who's a problem is Mrs. Cuffy, my science teacher. Actually, she's more than a problem. I think she hates me, and I'm not mad keen on her either. I'm not the only one who feels that way. Mrs. Cuffy is the nastiest teacher in the whole school, and we're all scared of her. She's long, stringy brown hair, just like rat's tails, and a pointed, twitchy nose, and I swear she has a straggly black moustache. It's bad luck that we don't get on because Mrs. Winkle says I've got to get good at science. You see, Mrs. Winkle knows something about me that very few people know. She knows that I, Anna Kelly, am a witch. And the reason she knows this is simple. It's because Mrs. Winkle, as well as being our head teacher, is also a witch. Of course, I'm only a junior witch, an apprentice, but Mrs. Winkle is an expert witch and she's helping to train me. She says that science should be one of my best subjects. In fact, she says I can't be a proper witch without natural science. I need to know all about plants and biology and why things in nature behave the way they do. But there's a problem. It's boring. I don't like science experiments out of books. I hate testing whether plants sweat and whether a coin is heavier than a cork in water. Instead, I like doing magic experiments that come out of my head. And what I'm really into is a type of magic I can do called shape-shifting. Shape-shifting is fantastic. No books, no test tubes. All you have to do is point at something, concentrate, and make up a magical rhyme. Then the thing you're pointing at turns into whatever you want, like an animal or a vegetable or anything. So there I was last Monday afternoon, sitting beside my friend Mary in the science lab. I was gazing out of the window and I was bored out of my tiny, weeny brain. I was daydreaming about flying out the window when suddenly a screech like a banshee shattered my thoughts and my eardrums. "Anna Kelly!" shouted Miss Cuffy. "Come to the front this minute." I shot up straight in my seat and met Mrs. Cuffy's beady little black eyes. Mary looked at me sideways. "You're in for it now," she whispered. "Thanks," I said. Mrs. Cuffy stood at the top of the class with her thin lips curling in disgust. In her hand she held one corner of a dirty piece of paper, waving it about as if it was an old snot rag. I took a deep breath and dragged myself up to face her. "And what," she shouted, twitching her moustache, "do you call this?" "My homework," I said. "Cheek," she snapped. "Detention tonight for being cheeky." I gasped. I wasn't being cheeky. The snot-raggy looking scrap was my homework. It wasn't my fault it ended up looking like that. My cat Charlie had eaten his dinner off it when I wasn't looking. "But miss," I said, it is my homework, look." I pointed at the untidy squiggles that were meant to be yet another experiment about the effects of vinegar and eggshells. It wasn't very good, but I'd done my best. "Anna Kelly," said Mrs. Cuffy, "this is meant to be a simple science experiment about weak acids, not an explosion in a cat food factory. You'll write it out again after school twice. Sit down." I trailed back to my desk and sat down. It wasn't fair. Out of the whole class, she always picked on me, and I was sick of it. Mary squeezed my arm and smiled at me in sympathy. The bell rang for the end of class and everyone leapt out of their seats. "Freeze!" shouted Mrs. Cuffy, and everyone froze. "Mary Maxwell, you will stay behind for smirking at Anna Kelly. The rest of you may all file out in an orderly fashion." Mary's mouth fell open in shock. But I wasn't smirking," she stammered. "Double detention for cheek," shouted Mrs. Cuffy. "Go and see Mrs. Winkle right now and tell her I sent you." Poor Mary went bright red and her eyes welled with tears as she walked slowly out of the classroom in front of the hushed boys and girls. She was supposed to be in gym competition tonight and now she'd miss it, all because of rat-faced whiskey Miss Coffee. And that was what did it. That was what finally made my blood boil. I'm not proud of it, but there and then I decided to do something drastic. I was going to teach Miss Coffee a lesson. Chapter 2, Anna teaches a lesson. I waited until the last person had left the classroom. Mrs. Coffey and I were alone. She plunked herself into her chair and took out a magazine. I shot my hand into the air. "Miss," I said, "please can I come to the front and collect my homework?" "Too dim to do it from memory, are we?" said Mrs. Coffey. "Very well, but don't disturb me again, and don't speak to that little friend of yours when she comes back. I hope Mrs. Wrinkle gives her what for." I pressed my lips together, slipped a pencil into my pocket and crept towards Miss Coffey's desk. I took my fishy-smelling homework from the pile and dropped it on the floor on purpose. "Clumsy clot," said Mrs. Coffey. Her beady little eyes stared at me for a second, and then she went back to reading her magazine. I dropped down onto my knees to make her think I was picking up my homework, but really I was quickly drawing a small 5-pointed magic star on the floor with my pencil. When I'd finished, I stood up and stepped inside the star. I put my hands on my hips, took a deep breath, and waited. Mrs. Coffey glanced up at me and glared. Her moustache twitched with irritation. "Anna Kelly," she shouted, "what do you think you're doing, standing there like an idiot? Get back to your seat at once." "I will go back to my seat, Miss Coffey," I said, "but not until you promise to let Mary go to gym instead of detention and say sorry for making her cry." "Say sorry?" spluttered Mrs. Coffey, dropping her magazine in shock. "Apologise to a pupil? Me? Are you mad?" I squared my shoulders. What you did wasn't fair, Mrs. Coffey," I said, "and I'm giving you one last chance to make amends." "You are giving me a chance," said Mrs. Coffey, slowly as if she couldn't believe her ears. Then she leapt out of her chair. "How dare you?" she shouted. "I've never been spoken to like that in my life." She picked up a ruler and advanced towards me. I caught my breath. Surely she wasn't going to clobber me. "It's about time you got what we used to call 6 of the best of my girls," she said. "6 of the best wallops I can give you." That was going too far. Detention is one thing, but even I know that hitting is wrong. It was time for plan B. I planted my 2 feet firmly in the magic star, pointed my finger at Mrs. Coffey and said the first rhyme that came into my head. "Unkind Coffey, cruel to kids, watch me put your life on skids, grow a rodent's tail and paws, and slink around upon all fours." Straight away I felt the power of magic surging from the floor beneath me. It shot through my legs into my whole body and out through the finger that pointed at Mrs. Coffey. A blue flash of light blinded me. When the smoke cleared, sitting on the chair where Mrs. Coffey had been was a large, greasy, brown rat.